You're playing New Vegas, just woke up, and you're thinking of what trait to pick. You can only pick 2 max. You've picked all the good traits and bad traits before, but then you get to the end. Wild Wasteland. Some of you immediately know what I'm talking about. Others might not have any clue. Take a trip because the Mojave just got wild. Wild Wasteland. The setup. Have you ever stumbled across something not quite right? Get the little theremin hum, see the little funky Vault Boy icon pop up, and then go, oh cool, a funny Easter egg, and move on? Yeah, no. That trait is basically Obsidian handing you a secret menu, and half the people who swear up and down that they know New Vegas have never even ordered from it, because Wild Wasteland isn't just jokes. It straight up changes locations, swaps out unique loot, and sometimes turns a normal moment into this weird little museum exhibit where New Vegas is making eye contact with you like, you get it, right? And the best part is that the game doesn't explain what you're about to miss. It just tells you, in that in-game description way, that it unleashes the most bizarre and silly elements of the Mojave. What it doesn't say is that you're also making a real choice, because taking Wild Wasteland changes certain encounters and locations, and the game marks them with that theremin sound and the ... message with the spiral-eyed Vault Boy icon. There are major encounters spread through the base game, and there are also smaller effects like extra dialogue lines that don't even trigger the pop-up. A little context, for those too young or too lazy to play or watch the originals. The Wild Wasteland encounters were designed as sort of a compromise between the gritty and grim worlds of Fallout 1 and 2, and the absolutely batty special encounters both those games had by default, not counting Fallout tactics. If you remember any of the Wild Wasteland encounters from New Vegas, they don't hold a candle to things like whale carcasses from space, talking Brahmin, or things from other franchises entirely. Instead of forcing them upon you, New Vegas decided to make it an optional trait, that way you could have a serious wasteland, or a bit of a sillier one. So here's what we're doing. We're going through them, one by one, and I'm not just telling you what this is a reference to or why. I'm telling you what the game actually does, where it happens, what you get out of it, and why some of these are way funnier or way darker than people give them credit for. And fair warning, if you're the kind of person who says, I don't care about Easter eggs, you might change your mind the second we hit the one that literally swaps an iconic unique weapon out of the world. Yeah, that one. Close Encounters of the Mojave. First up, the one that New Vegas basically uses as a handshake. Not so subtly named, that fridge was a death trap. You're leaving Goodsprings, you're still in that early game mindset of, wow, I'm so weak, a gecko could end my career. And slightly southeast of town, along the road out, you'll find a refrigerator just laying there in the desert. You walk up, you get the pop-up, and inside is a curled up skeleton and a suave gambler hat. Now, if you don't instantly know what that's referencing, don't worry, you still have a chance at a happy life. It's the whole Indiana Jones survives a nuclear blast by hiding in a fridge thing from the 4th Indiana Jones movie that had recently been released when New Vegas was being made, and the game even names the encounter like it's roasting him. It's not subtle, it's Fallout pointing at one of the most infamous WTF moments in blockbuster history and going, what if that happened here? Here, it didn't save him, because buddy, this is the Mojave. What I love about this one is how early it can happen. Like, the game is teaching you how Wild Wasteland works right away. You learn the language, hear the theremin, see the dots, and suddenly the dessert has a punchline hidden in it. This is the tutorial encounter for your brain, because the next time you hear that sound, you're not just going to be like, haha, funny. You're going to start hunting. You're going to start scanning every weird ridge and broken shack like you're a cryptid investigator with a Pip-Boy. Okay, the fridge is cute and all, but the next one is the reason some people refuse to play without Wild Wasteland at all. Hovering alien ship, also known as the hovering anomaly. And yes, this is the one where the game basically asks you, do you want aliens, or do you want a completely different unique weapon? Because you cannot have both in one playthrough without messing around. Here's what happens. You're up north, just north of the Horowitz farmstead, and from a distance, it looks like a mercenary camp. Normal New Vegas vibe, right? Like, oh cool, 4 people with guns who are absolutely gonna make this personal. But you get closer, the pop-up hits, and it turns into a straight-up extraterrestrial landing. Broken spacecraft, 3 stranded aliens, and if you look closely at the UFO, you can even see cables and tubes hanging out of a hatch. The ship is visually the same as the crashed recon craft Theta from Fallout 3 that kicks off Mothership Zeta, which is such a funny thing to just casually dump into the Mojave like it's roadside litter. Now for the part that matters, the loot and the trade-off. The alien captain has the unique alien blaster, plus over 100 alien power cells. The other 2 aliens have tri-beam laser rifles and various energy ammo. So if you're doing a lore-only aliens exist run, or you just want that iconic weapon, this encounter is basically your pilgrimage. Just keep in mind that those 100 power cells run out really fast, where microfusion cells are infinitely easier to come across and even manufacture and recharge. But without Wild Wasteland, that same spot is a mercenary camp, and one of those mercenaries carries the unique YCS/186 Gauss rifle. So by taking the trait, you're not just adding wacky content, you're replacing content, and the game is not blunt about it. With Wild Wasteland, the Gauss rifle is unobtainable, and without Wild Wasteland, the alien blaster is unobtainable. That's the trade. That's the deal with the tiny green devil. And in universe, I kinda love what this implies. It's like the Mojave has 2 possible truths, depending on what kind of story you want New Vegas to be. In one version, it's humans being awful to each other for money, which is the most Fallout thing imaginable. In the other version, you walk up and it's literally aliens, which is also the most Fallout thing imaginable. The only difference is whether you want your weirdness to be capitalism with guns or space horror with pew-pew. And yes, I'm aware that describing aliens as space horror is dramatic, but look me in the eyes and tell me you wouldn't panic if you saw 3 of those guys in the desert at night. Alright, now that you're officially awake, here's one people miss even when they do take Wild Wasteland, because it's conditional. What is it, boy? This encounter only appears if Rex is your active companion. And I love that, because it means the game is basically rewarding you for actually walking around with a dog instead of dumping him at the Kings like he's an old couch you're embarrassed of. So the setup is pure classic TV logic. At some point, Rex does his Aru thing, and your courier basically interprets it like, oh my god, he's trying to tell me something. And then you get a new map marker because apparently your Pip-Boy also speaks canine. The location is a well, east of New Vegas under an overpass. And when you get down there, it is not heroic. It's a child's skeleton, a mole rat, the Abilene Kid LEBB gun, 200 BBS, a rawhide cowboy hat, and a super stim pack. The reference stack here is actually kind of insane. It's referencing a similar quest in Fallout 2 involving a boy and a dog leading you to a well, and that is referencing Lassie, because for decades pop culture has been like, haha, what if a dog led you to a well? Even though Timmy never actually fell into a well on the show, he just got into a lot of similar predicaments. So Wild Wasteland is basically taking this whole cultural myth, running it through Fallout, and turning it into, yeah, the kid is dead, sorry. And that's the first time in this list where the wacky trait hits you with something that's actually kind of bleak. Like, the joke is the setup, but the punchline is that the Wasteland doesn't do sitcom endings. It's funny, and then it's sad, and then you're looting a tiny skeleton. Fallout in one sentence. Honestly, if you ever needed proof that Wild Wasteland isn't just LOL random, it's this. Now, if you thought the alien encounter was the weirdest thing Wild Wasteland could do, the next one is the one where New Vegas basically asks, what if your biggest threat was 3 elderly women with rolling pins? And you're going to laugh, and then you're going to get stabbed if you're not quick or careful enough. Enter Mod's Muggers. When you leave Cerulean Robotics, a group of 3 elderly women can ambush you. They're named Irate Ida, Rancorous Ruth, and Malefic Maud, and they're wearing pre-war spring outfits while armed with rolling pins or switchblades. They can even have a small amount of caps on them, implying they've been successful before. And the wild part is that people in Freeside might mention them. Like, this is not just a one-off gag, it's a thing the Wasteland is aware of. And the reference here is Monty Python's Hell's Grannies, which is exactly what it sounds like. A sketch about gangs of old ladies attacking young men. The Mojave takes that energy and goes, yeah, that's real now. And honestly, respect. Because if you've ever been in a grocery store and seen an older lady with a cart who has absolutely no fear of human life, you already know this encounter is lore accurate. Getting jumped by grannies with switchblades is the most realistic depiction of retirement in the entire Fallout franchise. Like, no pension, no 401k, just vibes and violence. These ain't the Golden Girls, these are the gory girls. Anyway, the important thing is that Wild Wasteland keeps doing this. It takes something silly, but it still grounds it in the Mojave. Caps on the bodies, locals whispering about them. It's funny, but it also feels like it belongs, which is weirdly hard to pull off. Wildly diabolical dialogue. Now let's slide into one of the not always marked with the pop-up style effects, because Wild Wasteland doesn't only live in random encounter spots. Sometimes it shows up as dialogue or a specific line change, and if you blink, you miss it. You're getting too close, Seamus. This one happens during the quest, I put a spell on you. If you accidentally tell Captain Curtis that you know a mole is using the control tower at night, and then you stake it out, he ambushes you, and right before he does, he says the line, "You're getting too close, Seamus." This phrase is taken directly from the Carmen Sandiego games, where NPCs would say it to indicate you were close to catching a criminal, as Seamus is slang for a private detective. And I love it, because it's like Wild Wasteland is rewarding you for playing New Vegas like a paranoid little investigator. You are literally sniffing out a traitor, and the game hits you with this old school, you're on the right track line, except in Fallout fashion, the reward for being right is getting shot at on a runway. It's the universe saying, congrats detective, and then immediately trying to kill you, which, again, is extremely Fallout. It's at this point that we're about to hit one of the most blink and you miss it environmental changes that can quietly mess with your sense of safety in the game. Because yes, Wild Wasteland can make the Mojave funnier, but it can also make it feel just slightly more cursed. Take the rodents of unusual size, for instance. This one is simple on paper. In certain underground locations, like the New Vegas sewers, the Brockflower Cave, or Vault 11, you can find rats that are 1.5 to 2 times larger than normal. The game calls them rodents of unusual size, and they're even referenced by Lady Jane. The reference is The Princess Bride and its ROUS monsters in the Fire Swamp. And there's even a wink to Fallout 2, where Klamath had a problem with big rats called RUS. Now, here's why this matters beyond the joke. New Vegas is already a game where underground spaces feel claustrophobic and dangerous, because you're usually down there for a reason, and that reason is never fun day trip. So increasing the size of the rats is a tiny mechanical change that makes your brain go, wait, am I in the normal timeline? It's subtle. It's not a cutscene. It's not a unique weapon. It's just the world being wrong by like 30%. And that's the kind of horror that actually actually sticks with you, because it feels like you're hallucinating. But don't worry, it's not the stench of the sewers. They're just big old rats in need of a slaying, assuming you don't have the animal friend perk. Also, shout out to the idea that some wastelander looked at a sewer rat that's twice as big as it should be and still went, yeah, I can name this and categorize it. This is a rodent of unusual size. That is the exact mindset of a person who has accepted too much about their reality. If you ever wonder why the NCR can't hold the Mojave, it's because everyone here is already mentally exhausted. Alright, this is the one that hits you like a truck if you already know what you're looking at. Owen and Baru, you're in Nipton, which is already a town that feels like the game is daring you to keep walking forward, and just in front of a ruined house to the right of the town hall, there are two skeletons next to each other. They look charred. You look closer, and the game identifies them. The male is Owen, the female is Baru. That is a Star Wars reference, specifically to Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle, Owen and Beru Lars, who are burned to death, with their corpses shown in basically the same pose. And what's nasty about it is the placement. Nipton is already about spectacle and cruelty, so dropping that reference there feels intentional. It's not just, haha, Star Wars. It's, here's one more reminder that this world burns families alive and leaves them in the sand. One can only imagine what happened to the Luke Skywalker equivalent in Nipton. Perhaps he's out in a wasteland far, far away. And if you're thinking, okay, but that's just a reference, I want you to sit with the fact that Wild Wasteland takes a pop culture tragedy and turns it into part of the Mojave's environmental storytelling. It's the game saying, you know this image, right? And then forcing you to view it through Fallout's lens, where there's no music swell, no heroic destiny, just two bodies and a desert wind. That's what makes Wild Wasteland work. It's not random for the sake of random. It's curated. It's the devs picking specific cultural artifacts and stitching them into the wasteland like patches on a jacket. Just stay with me here, because this is where New Vegas stops winking at you and starts full-on elbowing you in the ribs like, get it? Get it? Because if you thought a guy in a fridge and a UFO shootout were the peak of this trait, we haven't even gotten to the stuff Vault-Tec would classify as morale-boosting propaganda, and the NCR would classify as something to formally say, please stop making jokes on the emergency channel. Let's keep rolling. Wacky Wasteland oddities. First up, the game decides you deserve sacred violence. In the basement of the Searchlight East Church at Camp Searchlight, Wild Wasteland drops 3 holy frag grenades on a table, and there's literally a box next to them telling you to pull the pin and count to 3, with the 5 crossed out. It's a direct riff on the holy hand grenade bit, and I love it because Fallout is a universe where religion is already messy. But here it's like, what if the only holy relic we kept was a grenade? That's not even satire anymore. That's just the average Tuesday in the Mojave. Not to mention it's a callback to not just 1, but 2 similar encounters from Fallout 2, involving Brotherhood Knights looking for their own holy hand grenade. Now let's talk about Caesar's Legion getting hit with the most disrespectful grammar lesson in human history. At Cottonwood Cove HQ, Wild Wasteland adds graffiti on the north wall that reads Romanes und Domus. And if you're hearing that and going, oh wow, scary Latin, no, it's intentionally wrong Latin. It's the exact kind of petty, dumb, beautiful vandalism that makes you realize, yes, even under a brutal slaver empire, someone still took the time to do a joke that only works if you're a huge nerd. Imagine being a legionary, trying to look intimidating, and there's a wall behind you basically screaming, your empire is getting roasted by a guy with a sharp rock. That is cultural resistance at its finest. Okay, but the next one is where Wild Wasteland becomes an active menace to immersion, because it hijacks a murder investigation and turns it into a TV cold open. During Beyond the Beef, there's a dead investigator in an ultra-lux room. Normally, it's a generic nondescript character, but with Wild Wasteland, the corpse becomes Crusoe, complete with red hair, sunglasses, and the vibe of a man who's about to say something corny, remove his shades, and let a guitar sting do the rest. The game is basically forcing CSI Miami energy into the middle of a cannibal conspiracy, and honestly, that might be the most Fallout thing imaginable. Yes, we are uncovering a horrible crime. No, we will not be normal about it. And if you decide to frame Heck Gunderson during that same quest, it keeps going. One of the arresting Securitrons can hit you with dead or alive, you're coming with me. And generic Securitrons can also throw out your move creep. So in the middle of the strip, while rich people are eating other rich people, the police robots are doing RoboCop quotes. You know what? That tracks with the aesthetic of the area. The strip is basically what if capitalism survived the apocalypse and then got even more obnoxious. So, of course, law enforcement, there is a catchphrase machine to a movie that did almost the exact same things. Now, you might be thinking Wild Wasteland is just haha reference. You're wrong. Sometimes it changes how the Mojave feels. Like the next one, The One, also called The Big One. Slightly northwest of Devil's Throat, Wild Wasteland gives you a huge unexploded atomic bomb just sitting out there like the world's worst lawn ornament. Kind of like Megaton from Fallout 3, but infinitely more sensible, since nobody had the bright idea to build an entire town around it. You can crack it open and scavenge energy ammo, and there's a super mutant encampment close by, so it's not even a peaceful little sightseeing moment. It's more like Fallout looking you in the eyes and saying, you live in a world where a nuke can be set dressing, and your first instinct is to loot it. What does that say about you? Don't answer that. I don't want to know. Then we get one of the most deep-cut, terminally online before the term existed encounters in the entire game. Johnny 5 Aces. During the unmarked Barton the Fink setup south of Goodsprings, Wild Wasteland replaces a generic dead prospector with Johnny, wearing glasses, with a glass pitcher, 5 aces on the table, and 4 balls lined up on the cliff. And if you take a look outside the game, it's flat out explained that this is a reference to the failed something awful forum game project Zyborn Clock, plus that weird balls on a cliff metaphor people used to joke about time travel. This is the kind of reference that doesn't even feel like a reference. It feels like the developers left a cursed relic from an older internet inside the Mojave like it's an archaeological lair. Also, the 4 red balls actually point toward the Death Trap fridge encounter from earlier, which is hilarious because it's basically Wild Wasteland connecting its own episodes like a cinematic universe of stupidity. And right after that, the game pulls the most insane tonal shift possible. The final battle for Hoover Dam. If you listen to NCR emergency radio during the Endgame, Wild Wasteland can slip in lines like, "They're coming out of the walls, man," and "Game over, man, game over," which is, yes, an Aliens reference. The reason this one hits is because the NCR emergency radio is otherwise doing serious battlefield chatter, so hearing a soldier basically panic quoting a movie while the fate of the Mojave is on the line is both funny and weirdly human. Like, yeah, that's probably what real stress does to people. Your brain grabs the nearest familiar phrase and just throws it into the void. Except in Fallout, the void is full of artillery and screaming. Now let's rip through a handful of smaller Wild Wasteland changes that a lot of people miss, because they aren't big map moments, they're lines, audio, or tiny switches that make you go, wait, did that always happen? During King's Gambit, there's a Wild Wasteland dialogue path where you basically imply to Ambassador Crocker that Pacer has a heart condition and a jet problem, and Crocker responds, "Damn it, I'm an ambassador, not a doctor." It's a Star Trek style joke, the whole, "Damn it, I'm a doctor, not a," and then you insert whatever thing or occupation you need to complete the joke. And it's one of those lines that feels like it fell out of a totally different genre, which is the entire Wild Wasteland mission statement in one sentence. Oh, and if you warn Motor Runner you're there to kill him, Wild Wasteland can have him refer to his dogs as Donnie and Marie before the fight. Donnie and Marie Osmond were two of the 70s TV music group known as the Osmonds, and were later the namesake of a Red Dwarf joke regarding messing with anything that has more teeth than the Osmond family, which is rather fitting for two ferocious dogs. This is such a weird specific pull that it becomes funny, even if you don't get it. It's like the Mojave briefly becomes a late-night TV channel that only plays references from a dusty box in a studio basement. And then there's the Pimp Boy 3 billion. It's gold, it's blinged out with platinum, and if you have Wild Wasteland, equipping it plays disco music. That's it. That's the whole bit. And honestly, it's perfect, because the Pimp Boy is already the most I am making choices Pip Boy variant imaginable, so adding disco audio turns it into a walking lawsuit against subtlety. It helps that Fallout 2 and New Vegas have an excessive amount of pimping. If you ever wanted to storm a raider camp while your wrist is going boogie night fever, congratulations. New Vegas saw you coming. Mr. New Vegas also gets extra Wild Wasteland lines on Radio New Vegas, including him claiming he tried to measure his charisma on a Vidomatic vigor tester and it burst into flames, plus outros like "Stay Classy New Vegas" and "Mojave Mo Problems." It's small, but it changes the vibe of the radio into something a little more late-night host who survived nuclear war and is coping through bits. That and references to the 2004 film Anchorman and the Notorious B.I.G., which, again, can be relatable to those that grew up with those things. Then you have Freeside Securitrons at the Strip North Gate, because Wild Wasteland can make them shout "exterminate" repeatedly when fighting trespassers, and even Fisto can say it in combat too. The idea of Fisto, of all things, yelling "exterminate" is information I did not need, but now that I have it, it's stuck in my head forever. Thanks, game. There are also a couple of Wild Wasteland lines that are effectively bugged and won't normally fire because the condition checks are messed up, like Freeside locals yelling "witch, witch" at you if your Freeside reputation is terrible, and Cass potentially saying "ain't nothing but a hound dog" when she gets hit on by King's members. These are still part of the Wild Wasteland content pile, but the game's basically like, here's your joke, but you're not allowed to hear it, which is very on brand for Fallout's usual brand of spaghetti code, honestly. Speaking of Freeside, there's a little known character by the name of Gord, one of the Freeside drunks, or at least is known by them, who went out and built his own alcohol company at Brewer's Beer Bootlegging, home of Strategic Nuclear Moose. No prizes for the guess that it's a beer brand. As recently determined by Unearthed Cut Content, while Freeside drunks sometimes ask where Gord has gone off to, a line that was unfortunately cut, a new line exclusive to the July 2010 build, revealed that there was an additional line, "if you killed Gord," parodying a famous philosopher's quote by stating, "Gord is dead and you have killed them," for another cut bit. But according to the December 2009 beta build, should the player have let Benny live instead of killing him and met him at the fort where he was captured by Caesar's Legion, he would have asked the player if they liked movies about gladiators, repeating a quote from the disaster/comedy movie parody Airplane, for a final bout of cut and not even found. Content, one of the developers had the idea for a Wild Wasteland radio station featuring cameos from other developers, inspired by the work of Art Bell, a famous coast-to-coast radio host host whose radio station covered every conspiracy theory, ghost story, urban legend, you name it, he talked about it. The developer even envisioned Bell cameoing as the voice talent hosting the station. Although the station concept was approved, it was ultimately cut due to localization issues. Unfortunately, as far as anyone's been able to find, no records of this station exist in the recently discovered beta builds of the game, but that doesn't mean they're lost forever. We're not done though. You might think Wild Wasteland is just base game Mojave nonsense. Nope, it infects the DLC too. And sometimes the DLC is where it gets the weirdest, because the tone is already shifted, so the trait can go absolutely feral. Wild Wasteland DLC Edition. Dead Money has a few of my favorites, because Dead Money is already stressful, and Wild Wasteland is like, what if we gave the horror movie a little clown horn? Dog can say om, nom, nom when eating ghost people, which is absurd because Dead Money is usually all dread and paranoia. And now your companion is basically doing Cookie Monster energy in a poison casino nightmare. Dean Domino can also deliver "he's not dead, it's a trick, get an axe." And there's graffiti in the wine cellar near the gala trigger that says, "I am not your mummy." So yeah, while you're trying not to die to toxic gas and murderous holograms, the game is also leaving you internet meme food and Doctor Who graffiti. Honest Hearts keeps it simpler, but still hilarious. You can encounter a dead horse's tribal literally named Two Bears High-Fiving, and there's a moment where Whitebird can shout, "Take drugs, kill a bear," when he gives you the rite of passage objective. I can't stress enough how funny it is for Honest Hearts, the DLC, with heavy themes about survival and faith and tragedy, to occasionally sound like it's quoting a cursed motivational poster from 2011, which is funny because the high-fiving thing comes from the release of New Vegas, where one of the blot test images looked exactly like the tribal's namesake, but you couldn't comment on it. Old World Blues is basically Wild Wasteland's natural habitat, because that DLC is already science went wrong and now everything is a gag and a nightmare at the same time. With Wild Wasteland, you can find robots called walking eyes in the magnetohydraulics complex, and you can even hear Dr. Zero over the intercom telling lobotomites not to neglect washing the walking eye. That's so specific. It feels like an inside joke that escaped containment. Behind Boris's house, the doghouse can contain a miniature deathclaw named Stripe with a chicken leg nearby, and Stripe won't go far past the fountain before retreating. There's also a garbled intercom message in X7A that ends with "and then explode and die," which is exactly the kind of sentence you'd expect to hear right before your limbs get detached by a toaster with opinions. And then OWB just keeps stacking them. In X8, after the high school testing area, there's a room where you can look through a window and see police cyberdogs sitting around a table with cards, chips, and alcohol like they're having the worst poker night in recorded history. It's a reference to the famous painting of dogs playing poker, but the DLC makes it post-apocalyptic and deeply unsettling. But don't worry, it balances it out with the most adorable image of Vault Girl petting said dogs for being such good boys. In that same general zone, you can find Wolverines, spelled on a wall, a reference to Red Dawn, which fits the setting of a high school dominated by anti-communist rhetoric and propaganda. In addition to all of that, at a construction site you can see 7 intact garden gnomes arranged with pickaxes and lanterns around the red crystals like the 7 dwarves clocked in for their shift. Meanwhile, in places like X12 and Z43, you can hear a Y17 trauma override harness say, "Hey, who turned out the lights?" Which is genuinely creepy in context because those suits are already walking corpse puppets. Wild Wasteland is really good at doing that, by the way. It'll make you laugh, and then 2 seconds later you go, wait, that's horrifying. Then you've got more OWB drive-by weirdness. A truck northeast of the big MT West tunnel that looks like it's been cut in half by a hill, with radioactive waste in the bed and a license plate reading Rocket 88, a reference to not just one, but 2 things. The first being the film The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension, where the protagonist attempts the same thing and doesn't get stuck in a mountain, but instead drives right through it, and the Ike Turner song Rocket 88. But how about the fact that Dr. Mobius can mention Plan 9 instead of Plan C? For those who don't know, Plan 9 is a space zombie and 1950s weirdness flick, and near the think tank or the sink, you can find "Kilroy was here" graffiti along with a little doodle face peeking over a line, a very common trend for soldiers to make during the Vietnam War. The DLC is already a theme park of scientific hubris, so Wild Wasteland basically just adds souvenir magnets. Lonesome Road has fewer, but they hit differently, because Lonesome Road is so bleak. In Cave of the Abaddon, Wild Wasteland gives you a petrified dog corpse named Seymour near Sunflower Summer's body, which is a reference that, if you know it, can go from awe to oh no in about half a second. Crafting the Fist of Roar, which you can only get from the mighty Deathclaw known as Roar, can rename it to Fist of the North Roar, and the password to the office of the Treasurer Terminal in the 3rd Street Municipal Building can be guessed. Because yes, even at the end of the world, somebody still set the password to guess. Cybersecurity truly died in 2077. One last thing, this is the kind of detail people love. The credits themselves can change significantly with Wild Wasteland, including silly nicknames and nonsense messages, with developers referring to themselves as things like Lord, Subterranean Solzhenitsyn Aficionado, or simply simply Detroit. Not to mention that the name Dead Money gets replaced with Dead Monkey in places. It's basically the developers leaving you one final thanks for playing prank, Wild Wasteland after New Vegas. Alright, so we just spent all this time in New Vegas treating Wild Wasteland like it's some magical switch you flip that makes the Mojave start hallucinating pop culture at you. And it kind of is. But here's the part most people stop at. They talk about the trait like it died in 2010 and got buried somewhere behind a billboard outside Novak. That's not what happened. What happened is way weirder. Wild Wasteland didn't go away. It basically escaped containment. It stopped being a perk you pick, and it started becoming a design vibe that seeps into the franchise whenever Fallout wants to remind you, yes, the world ended in nuclear fire, but it also ended in a universe where an alien can show up on a random Tuesday and nobody even pretends that's the strangest thing anymore. And if you want proof, you don't even have to squint. The later games don't bring the trait back as an actual selectable New Vegas style option, but the spirit of it keeps showing up in how Bethesda builds comedy, horror, and what am I looking at moments into the world itself. Let's start with Fallout 4, because Fallout 4 is basically the Wild Wasteland always on argument in game form. Not literally. The trait isn't sitting in character creation waiting for you like it's 2010 again, but the game is packed with the same kind of logic. You're exploring ruins, you turn a corner, and suddenly the wasteland is doing a full-on bit. Fallout 4 has entire clusters of cultural references and set-piece jokes that aren't tied to one big questline. They're just there, living in the environment, waiting for you to notice. The Fallout 4 cultural reference list is enormous, and it includes stuff like that Nuke World funhouse room that's basically animals playing poker energy, plus tons of other little nods that feel like the exact same design impulse as New Vegas saying Wild Wasteland and flashing the 3 dots at you. And then you've got moments like Kid in a Fridge, where you hear a voice calling from a refrigerator and out pops Billy Peabody, a ghoul kid claiming he's been trapped since the bombs fell, and the game just commits to it with a straight face. That quest is basically Fallout 4's mission statement for this whole style. Yes, we know this is absurd. No, we are not explaining it. Enjoy the nightmare sitcom. If New Vegas used Wild Wasteland as a label, Fallout 4 just embeds the label into the level design and lets you discover it like you're an archaeologist uncovering the remains of a joke that refused to die. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, Fallout 4 has jokes and references, so what? No, the point isn't just that Fallout 4 is funny sometimes. The point is that Fallout 4 treats that kind of randomness as world texture, not a special mode. In New Vegas, the weirdness is a toggle, like you're choosing whether the Mojave is slightly more unhinged today. In Fallout 4, the Commonwealth is already unhinged. It's in the bones. You can walk from a Grim Raider scene straight into a visual gag without the game pausing to tell you, this one counts, that's the legacy. Wild Wasteland stops being a perk and turns into a toolbox. Bethesda doesn't need the pop-up. They let the player be the pop-up. And then you hit Fallout 76, and the whole concept mutates again. Because 76 doesn't just sprinkle weirdness into exploration. It industrializes it. It turns it into seasonal content, public events, community rituals, full-scale, the sky is doing something stupid again moments. If Wild Wasteland in New Vegas is an occasional jump scare from comedy, Fallout 76 is like, what if the Wasteland scheduled the comedy for 3 p.m. and everyone showed up? Take the Mothman Equinox, a seasonal event where players perform a ritual to summon the Wise Mothman, introduced with a Night of the Moth update and cycled back in later event runs. That is pure Wild Wasteland energy, except now it's not a hidden encounter you stumble on alone, it's a public spectacle. Or look at Invaders from Beyond, the alien-themed seasonal event built around a Zeton incursion. New Vegas used aliens like a rare little wink. Fallout 76 turns it into a whole event structure, complete with patch notes and rotating availability, like extraterrestrials are just another Tuesday maintenance window. And that's the funniest part. It's not even framed as, wow, aliens. It's framed as defend Appalachia against a mysterious force from the stars. Like this is simply what your HOA meetings look like after the apocalypse. Here's the gist for the 76 side, because this is where Wild Wasteland's impact becomes super obvious. Fallout 76 basically proves that the franchise learned the wrong lesson in the best way possible. Instead of saying people loved Wild Wasteland, so let's bring the trait back, the modern Fallout approach is people loved Wild Wasteland, so let's make the wasteland itself behave like it has the perk. And 76 is the extreme version of that. Between cryptid-focused content like Mothman-themed events and straight-up alien invasions as recurring public activities, the game is telling you that the post-war world has become so saturated in bizarre phenomena that you don't need a toggle anymore. You need a calendar. Get ready. Because here comes the tabletop side. Because yes, even the Fallout 2D20 and the wider Modifius Fallout line gets touched by this idea, even if it's not always in the exact same mechanical form as New Vegas. You'll see Wild Wasteland used as a tone phrase in Fallout, the role-playing game-related material, with the general vibe being the wasteland is chaotic, unpredictable, and it's up to your table how weird it gets. But the biggest, clearest Wild Wasteland Lives moment is how Modifius explicitly uses Wild Wasteland rules as a label for optional, spice-it-up alternatives in their Fallout miniatures and skirmish side, like Fallout Factions. They straight up Tabletop frames certain variant rules as Wild Wasteland options that are not meant for standard play, but meant to shake things up in surprising ways. That's basically the Tabletop translation of the trait's original purpose, a clearly marked choice that says, if you want the game to get a little weirder, here's the lever. Even in their Fallout 2 D20 RPG, their astoundingly awesome Tales brand may as well be a spin-off of Wild Wasteland. One moment you're doing an adventure where you help drug addicts recover from a new, dangerous, and highly addictive chem, and the next you're helping the NCR destroy or save a Zaytan village out in the middle of the Mojave that's also being attacked by the Legion. Or how about activating a power armor with an artificial brain inside it while also downing beer literally made from Red Rocket nuclear coolant pumps? That's just scratching the surface of what it has to offer. So when you zoom out, here's what Wild Wasteland actually did to Fallout after New Vegas. It became a language. In Fallout 4, it shows up as environmental comedy and cultural reference density, where the world constantly feels like it's one missed medication away from doing stand-up. In Fallout 76, it evolves into community-scale weirdness, ritual events, aliens as seasonal content, and cryptid madness that's treated like a normal part of life in Appalachia. And in the tabletop space, it survives as an explicit label for optional chaos, a wink from the designers that says, we know what you want, here, have the weird switch. The trait didn't die. It just stopped being a trait and started being a philosophy. Fallout can be horrifying, tragic, and brutal, and it can also be completely ridiculous in a way that makes the tragedy hit harder right after you stop laughing. And honestly, that's kind of perfect, because if the apocalypse taught Fallout's world anything, it's that reality is optional, and the wasteland is always ready to prove it. That was every Wild Wasteland encounter explained. If you want to see what happened to every forgotten survivor in Fallout, click the video on the screen.